Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, we are back. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Of course, your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another one, guys. Well, you guys may have seen the reports by now, but Jeremy Fowler reported that the Indianapolis Colts have some interest in 4 different quarterbacks that he mentioned that are currently free agents. And those 4 players, in no particular order, are Daniel Jones, Jacoby Brissett, Trey Lance, and then it came out a little bit later that Justin Fields was another player the Indianapolis Colts are interested in adding here onto their roster. And obviously, Derek, we have heard Chris Ballard come out and say it's an open quarterback competition between who they bring in and Anthony Richardson. And, some people have kind of argued, is that a legitimate competition or not? And so today I thought that we could kind of rank the 4 quarterbacks in terms of the best options for the Colts versus the worst options for the Colts, kind of give our thoughts on each player here and who would we like to see the Indianapolis Colts bring in and who would we like to see them stay far away from. So with that being said, Derek, I think we could just start from number 4 and work our way up to number 1 if that works for you. And number 4 for us that we have here is Trey Lance. And obviously, Derek, he was a high-round pick a number of years ago for the San Francisco 49ers. Didn't work out, was a major draft bust there. He's kind of been around. He was with Dallas, and he's really hasn't found a landing spot long-term, and obviously has not lived up anywhere close to, the draft billing that he was taken out of North Dakota State a number of years ago. So we have him here as probably the weakest option for us. I'm curious what your thoughts would be on this, but I guess my initial thoughts are he's, similar to AR in the fact that he was taken in a lot of ways because of, the pure ability that he had. We know he has a big arm. We know he could do some crazy stuff in college, but maybe wasn't necessarily like a guy that a lot of people looked at and viewed as a top 3 pick, so there was a lot of question marks coming out of Trey Lance. We knew it was going to be a big risk for the 49ers to do that, and obviously it didn't pay out. He didn't really start for them or play for them at all, in the couple of years he was there, and it just ended up not working out. But he's the guy, Derek, that I think he's really hasn't done anything in the NFL at all. I mean, he's just been a backup pretty much after his time in San Francisco, hasn't really done much at the NFL level. So even though he is still, decently young, I don't know, Derek, it's a guy compared to the other 3 guys, he really hasn't had any sort of success that makes you think that he would actually do anything for the Indianapolis Colts, So I'm curious what your thoughts would be here on Trey Lance.
Yeah, I can't even really say in regards to Trey Lance that, because the quarterback before him that came from the same university that he did, Carson Wentz. And I mean, Carson Wentz, when he came into the NFL, originally started out as a really good quarterback. So you can't even really say much about it. It was just, like you said, he had one season where he played pretty good. And he didn't really have a lot more outside of that. He got injured, and then they just took him off of the fact that they had no quarterback option, and they were desperate. And you're right. I don't know what has really happened with Trey Lance. He obviously had more injuries as time went along, and he just wasn't prepared. He wasn't prepared, and, he wasn't in a good spot. And, it's just one of those where, of all the names, I could at least hear a couple people's arguments for any of the rest of these names being backups to Anthony Richardson and actually being able to be serviceable if time were to come for him. But for Trey Lance, there's nothing to go off of with Trey Lance. There is absolutely nothing. Yes, he's young, and and you can't ever say he was never given the fair benefit of the doubt. He did. He played for San Francisco, and he was so bad, he got benched mid-season. He didn't play all in 2023 after Brock Purdy came in because he got injured again. And, Brock Purdy was by far and away the better quarterback than Trey Lance ever was. And so that's kind of a situation where, if you're bringing Trey Lance in, what kind of what kind of message is that actually sending, right?
Right.
It's not a real competition at that point if you're doing that.
Well, and you've heard about like the Colts wanting to add somebody who has actual experience, who actually has had some success, that could actually legitimately push AR. And again, how true is that? We don't know. That's kind of been the big debate. But Trey Lance would be the guy that would, out of all these guys, he's had no experience. Like he only had 4 starts in 2 years with the San Francisco 49ers. So either he was not available or he wasn't very good for them. So yeah, I just think when you look at it, like that's clearly not going to be really any competition. I don't think. I mean, it could be wrong there, but yeah, out of the 4, Trey Lance for sure is a guy that you just look at and say he's either been injured or hasn't been any good. But I guess the only positive would be, Derek, that he is the youngest player here of the 4, right? He's only 24 years old. So that would be the biggest, like, maybe there's still something to mold there, but I don't know. For me, I'm like, I kind of want to stay far away from that. I mean, there's a reason San Francisco moved off of him so quickly, right? They didn't even give him a year 3, like the Colts are giving AR, right? So that's kind of how bad it was. So yeah, I would say no for Trey Lance, please.
Yeah.
But moving on to number 3, it's a guy that we know very well, Derek, was an Indianapolis Colts quarterback for, what was that, like 3-4 years, Jacoby Brissett. He came in obviously in 2017. He started that year. He was the backup for a couple seasons there. Actually, he was a backup in 2018. Then he started in 2019. Then he was the backup in 2020. And then obviously the Colts did not retain him after that. And he's kind of been around. Of course, Jacoby Brissett, he's kind of been around and, gone to different teams, been kind of a bridge / backup quarterback pretty much in his time at the NFL level. He's been a guy that can come in and be serviceable, but Derek, he's older at this point in his career. He's going to be a guy that's maybe more in the Joe Flacco type of mold a little bit more, right? He's obviously not as old as Joe Flacco, but he's going to be that guy that, I think out of the 4 quarterbacks, he's going to be the guy that probably understands a little bit more. Like it's more of that type of situation, you know what I mean? Where he's not going to probably start. Now, could he? Sure, he could. But I don't know. Jacoby's a decent quarterback, but I just kind of look at it and say, do you want Jacoby where you really don't think long-term that's what he's looking for because he's at this point? Again, he's a competitor, but I don't know. I just kind of struggle with, signing 30-plus-year-old quarterbacks at this point versus some of the other 2 guys who are still, decently young in their 20s. So I like Jacoby. I think he's always been a good player. He's always been a solid, backup / relief guy. But I don't know, Derek. I'm kind of like he has a pretty decent track record. But I do think there's some other options that would maybe have a little bit more upside than him at this point in his career. As much as I like Jacoby and respect him and welcome him back with open arms, I don't know, man. I'm kind of torn on that. What do you think?
Well, I mean, of course, like you said, there's a connection with Jacoby Brissett, right? He knows Chris Ballard, knows, a good chunk of the players on the Indianapolis Colts team. So, there's familiarity in a way, maybe not to this offensive staff, mainly to the entire coaching staff in general. But, as far as, understanding some of the players and understanding the top executives, yeah, there's some familiarity there. So, it wouldn't be too bad for Jacoby Brissett coming in. But again, Jacoby Brissett has never been a guy that is, going to take the roof off of anything. We've seen a couple times, Cody, where he's been a starter. We remember that 2017 season where he came in late for us. You remember the 2019 season where he had to take over after Andrew Luck retired. And then after that, he had a couple other options to go different places, but he, just never really panned out. Jacoby Brissett is a guy that's been a career backup, and he's only ever really going to be a career backup. So he's a guy that, again, if you're concerned about the potential of your quarterback going down again, which is definitely something the Indianapolis Colts should be concerned about, then Jacoby Brissett would be a guy that you would want to have for a game or 2 to hold you by until Anthony Richardson came back. But again, if you are looking for competition, Jacoby Brissett really isn't going to be that guy. Because again, if Jacoby Brissett won the starting job out of Anthony Richardson, then I mean, there's a situation where I could say that he could, Cody, but that's not going to drastically improve your team, though. That's the ultimate problem is, Jacoby Brissett could be Anthony Richardson out for the job, but is that really going to make you that much more dynamic offensively? I really don't think it does.
Well, I think the positive for Jacoby also would be he'd be a great mentor to have in that locker room. We
Yes.
know how great of a locker room guy he is. So that could be a good thing there. If you do bring him in, Derek, he would be a great mentor for AR. I do believe that. So that would be but are the Colts looking for more of a mentor or more of a competitor? That's the biggest question mark there. They've said competitor. So to me, that wouldn't scream competitor. But that's just me.
As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. Now, what is PrizePicks? PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
All right, we got 2 more here, and the second one, and I know a lot of people are turned off to this name, but I actually don't think it'd be as bad as some people are making it out to be. Daniel Jones, again, a guy that clearly a draft bust in New York. He's been nothing short of mediocre with him. I mean, definitely has not been worth that high draft pick they had a number of years ago in him. But I do think, Derek, for a guy that can come in and compete, I do think Daniel Jones is kind of built the same way as Anthony Richardson in terms of he's very athletic. He's got a big arm. He can, make throws, but also he struggles to be a consistent quarterback passing the football, right? So it'd be a lot of that kind of same stuff there with Daniel Jones. But, I mean, out of, the other quarterbacks, he's a little bit younger than some of these other quarterbacks we've looked at or a little bit more experienced. So I'm not saying I would love it, but I would say I'd be okay with it, I think, for Daniel Jones, because I think if you look at him purely as like a backup, I think he'd be a pretty solid backup. But he'd be also a guy that I think could come in and compete with AR and actually push him a little bit more than maybe some of these other guys. And he's a guy that's looking for another chance, Derek. He's looking for another chance to show himself and prove himself that he can maybe, with a new change of scenery, we've seen it with other quarterbacks, maybe he could find himself. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that could be a situation where he looks at this and says, this is one of my best chances to come in and seriously compete for a starting quarterback position this next year. So what would be your thoughts on Daniel Jones? I know a lot of people immediately when they hear that name, they kind of like gag a little bit. They're like, no, keep him away. But I think when you actually dive in, I'm not saying he's been a great player by any stretch, but I think he would be okay. I think I'd be all right with him. What do you think?
It's kind of funny, Cody, because Daniel Jones to me is the perfect example of the type of quarterback where I feel like it could suffice both sides of groups here, where my side, where I say the Colts really aren't going to bring somebody in that truly is going to win the starting job. They're there just to like put on a show. And then it suffices some of the people on your side where it's like he actually does have some things that he's shown where he can actually, be in a good spot for, the upcoming teams. And why he's number 2 on the list is because versus him and Jacoby Brissett, we know what Jacoby Brissett's ceiling is. We know where that is. We like to think we know where Jones's is, but the problem is now, like over the last few years, things have gone so awry that it's hard to know just how good he actually is. But look, I mean, he would be coming into a better situation in Indianapolis than what he has been with New York, at least over the last few years with New York. New York didn't get him a good offensive line. They got him no weapons. They got rid of the only weapon that he did have, which doesn't really correlate specifically with him and Saquon Barkley. And then you had question marks about your coaching staff. Again, it was a bad situation for Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones has looked abysmal the last few years. There's a reason why the Giants were willing to take that cut cut him because he was that bad. I mean, listen, Cody, Andrew Luck has never had an offensive line, man, but he was still putting up generational all-time QB numbers. Okay? Quarterbacks should be able to step up in the situations where the rest of their team fails them, right? That's what separates the really good quarterbacks from the average quarterbacks. And Daniel Jones has never been more than an average quarterback. Even in his best season in I don't even know what year it was at this point, but the year where he threw 15 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And had 10 rushing touchdowns. Okay, whatever. But that should have never been rewarded the way that it was by the New York Giants. And now they're figuring out why their stupidity cost them. You should have never paid him that amount of money because after that, you screwed yourself.
Yep.
And Daniel Jones, I understand there are qualities where he could really benefit from a Shane Steichen-led offense, but I've never had faith in Daniel Jones. Never thought he could actually legit contend for a real starting job. He got the job in New York because their GM thought he was playing chess and everyone else was playing checkers, and it failed miserably for them. So people have their differing opinions on Daniel Jones. I really don't think – I think he's a great second backup quarterback that, could definitely push Anthony Richardson a little bit, but I don't think he would ever actually beat out Anthony Richardson for the starting job.
Well, Derek, to be fair, Anthony Richardson was god-awful last year, too.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
I mean, you don't know, right? So, I mean, he could. Theoretically, he could. I think he could. And, he like I said, we've seen different quarterbacks who a little bit later in their career, they find themselves. Now, Daniel Jones has not done really a lot in the last couple of years to believe he can do that. And trust me, we're not going to die on the hill of Daniel Jones. We are not going to be about that. I know some people are, which I think is kind of insane, but we're not going to do that. He hasn't been a good quarterback. You can argue about the stuff that has or has not been around him the last couple of years. But bottom line is, Derek, he has not been a great quarterback. But I think if you bring him in for competition, out of the 4, I think he would probably be my second favorite option out of the 4. Again, there could be some other players that, are also rumored here in the next couple of days, but as it currently stands, and that kind of probably shows you also the state of the free agent class at quarterback, right? So, yeah, he's clearly the number 2, I think, for me, just because he's going to be 28 in May. So he's got a couple more years in his 20s. He could potentially push AR, I think, a little bit more than the other 2 guys. So that's kind of why we have him here at number 2. But number 1, Derek, is a guy that I mentioned already and a guy that we have really, we wanted the Colts to draft him back in 2021. And, obviously he's been around to a couple different teams now. And that, of course, is Justin Fields. And Derek, I mean, Justin Fields, I think, is by far and away the best option here for the Indianapolis Colts. But as a result, he will also cost the most out of any of these four guys. But Derek, if the Colts are serious about actual competition, like legit competition, I think that Justin Fields would be a guy that out of any of these four would seriously threat Anthony Richardson, like seriously threat him for that starting quarterback position. I do believe that would be an option for him. And again, we'll have to see. Does Pittsburgh decide to re-sign him or not? Well, we're not entirely sure yet. And we still got about a week to go till we see what happens and if he does hit the open market. But Derek, I mean, we know the Colts, back in that draft process, we know they were rumored to really like Justin Fields a lot. So is this kind of Chris Ballard writing that wrong a little bit and going and getting his guy? Now, it would cost you a lot, and you definitely would. I know Chris Ballard doesn't like to, think about maybe having some cap casualties, but you might have to do that or some restructures in order to make this happen. But it definitely would be a guy, and I think it would send a strong message to Anthony Richardson, Derek, that, dude, you're not safe here at all with this position. You got to go out there and prove that you are the guy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no doubt. I think if you look at all of this, no doubt that Justin Fields in a lot of ways has the highest upside when it comes to this. Like you said, it's only going to be 26 this year and, has a lot of opportunity still left in him. Again, Cody, I give Justin Fields a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in the sense that he got drafted by the Chicago Bears. They've never had success with quarterbacks, ever. Their best quarterback in the history of their program is Jay Cutler, okay? And if that tells you anything. And then you go to the Steelers, who, again, they're having this QB Cody, again, they had this QB competition thing. Justin Fields, he goes out there. He's not putting up astronomical numbers, but the team was winning with him. In the 4 games he started, they went 3-1. The only team they lost to, the Indianapolis Colts. That was the only one in which they lost. They were 3-1. Their team was moving on. The offense was not really clicking, but the defense was carrying the offense, and they weren't losing games off the back of Justin Fields. Then they bring Russell Wilson in finally after he's not injured, and sure, the numbers looked better at some points, but then the Steelers kind of fell off at the end of the year, So that's another reason why I kept saying that this whole quarterback competition thing, it doesn't really help. It's just a way for people to say they're having competition. But you're right. Justin Fields, that one would probably be the most money of the 4 guys that you have here. How much? I'm not sure. The market value, if you go on Spot Track, is like $6.5 million, which, I mean, I wouldn't argue with that. I wouldn't argue with that kind of price tag.
Really low. That's really low.
I think some people are like, oh, he'd probably get like 12 to 15. But the problem I have is that, he did some good things. But like when it comes to overall, there's not a lot of teams that are going to immediately want to give him a starting job. So that's the one concern. And then second of all, like with Pittsburgh, again, he started in 6 games, played in 10, and only had 10 touchdowns. It was 5 passing and 5 rushing. So it's not like the numbers were astronomical.
That's fair.
Also, the other thing is does he want to come to another team where he has to compete for a quarterback spot, and not to mention where the odds are against him? Because again, Cody, when we talk about these quarterbacks, right, I think people are smart enough to understand this is Anthony Richardson's job to lose. Yeah, they're coming in and they're saying it's open competition. But we all know whatever quarterback they bring in is going to be behind the 8 ball, unless it's like Sam Darnold or something. The only quarterback that the Indianapolis Colts could take in this free agent class that is not going to be behind the 8 ball with Anthony Richardson to start when they get in the building is Sam Darnold. That's the only one. Outside of that, everyone else knows there is a decent shot that I'm not going to be the starting quarterback this year. Even no matter if I do good in training camp and all this other stuff, there's a good chance I'm not the starting quarterback. So does Justin Fields want to be included in that metric? Is he willing to go to another potentially bad team to, secure more of a spot and that he has a more legit chance of being the starting quarterback? I have no idea. But like you said, it comes back to the, it'll be interesting to see what teams are actually going to look for a quarterback like Fields.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the upside is that he has had some years where he's looked decent. Like he's had some times where he's shown flashes like he could be a franchise guy, and then he's had some inconsistencies, right? But he is still very young, Derek. I mean, Justin Fields, 25 right now? So he's still got, some time ahead of him. He's still got, some years ahead of him here to be that guy, right? So yeah, I think he would make some sense there for the Colts. And interesting enough, Derek, stylistically, when you look at three of these four quarterbacks, they're very similar to AR in the fact that they all are very athletic. They all, well, you would probably say their strength is their running ability, and they've struggled to be consistent passers, right? So, like, all these quarterbacks outside of probably Jacoby Brissett have all been labeled as those type of guys that kind of some people are throwing it around in terms of AR, right? Where they really struggle with passing consistently on a week to week, play to play basis. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. But I find it interesting that they're kind of zeroing in on a few guys that are very similar to them in those ways. So yeah, we'll have to see, man. I mean, there could be some other quarterback news. I mean, I know there's been a rumor out there about Sam Darnold, but personally, Derek, I don't think you're going to pay him that kind of money. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for the Colts right now, because I think if you do that, you're basically giving up on AR at that point, right? Like you're basically waving the white flag at that point with them and saying, we're done with them. We're going to go get a proven guy. So I just don't think realistically it makes a lot of sense for the Colts. But, dude, I don't know. Free agency surprises me a lot of times. So you never know what's going to happen there. But, yeah, guys, those are four names here that the Indianapolis Colts have been linked to, according to Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. So I would love to hear your thoughts on how you'd rank them. Do you agree with us? Would you rank them Trey Lance, Jacoby Brissett, Daniel Jones, and Justin Fields, or how would you rank them? Let us know all those things in the comments down below. If you haven't already, guys, be sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, all that good stuff as we are entering into free agency here in the next week. You guys definitely want to be a part of that, so be sure to follow along as we drop content. And it looks like the Colts will be more active this year. Hopefully they will. We'll be able to have some news for you guys. So definitely want you guys to be able to follow along and get our updates as they come in. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.